All right, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Like I said before, my name is Yukfei Chan. I'm from the OWASP Toronto chapter. Officially want to say welcome to a very special chapter event here. Just a little bit of background. Because of the pandemic, we've been forced to do our chapter meetups virtually, and we've tried to work very hard to keep the chapter active by doing our events on YouTube, doing live streams and the live chat. But as you know, that hasn't been very good from an interaction perspective. So we've thought of using GatherTown as a platform where people can have some more interaction, talk with the speakers, and also have side chats if they wanted to. When Detectify approached us and wanted to sponsor an event, we thought this would be the perfect opportunity to try this out. We've set this up. Hopefully, you enjoy this. Um, Before we start, I'd like to invite Alina to come on the stage and say a few words about Detectify.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Alina Lucian. I represent Detectify today together with my colleague Jocelyn. So if you have any questions about what we do, you can reach out. But we at Detectify help companies to get visibility over their dynamic attack surface and discover and test services that they host, and also the web apps that they build. And we also, why we are here is because we do collaborate a lot with ethical hackers, and we source real hacker payloads and detect security misconfigurations and other web vulnerabilities with their help. So do check out our Detectify crowdsource program. And this is a community of handpicked ethical hackers. If you are passionate about hacking, you do the application, we accept you, and then you can help millions of end users with your next vulnerability finding, as well as get some financial rewards. So welcome everyone, and the word goes back to Yakfai.
All right. Thank you, Alina, and thank you, Detectify, for sponsoring this event. Hi, Scotty Go. All right. Yeah, I'm just gonna do a quick intro to GatherTown and some ground rules. So as you probably notice, it's kind of a 2D environment where it simulates in-person meetups, but virtually. So you can see and talk to each other if you are in physical or in close proximity to another attendee. You can also use the chat function to chat with other people. Um, when you are in the conference hall, right now you can hear the speaker from the podium because we have a spotlight spot here on the podium. And we will be having some lightning talks. What we're going to ask you to do is to keep your questions until the end. And then as you can see to the right of the podium, there is a side podium really, where you can come up and ask questions. That's where Jocelyn is right now. Uh, so once the talks are over, we're gonna invite you up to ask questions on the Q in the Q&A. A little bit of ground rules. There's not much really. Just be nice and be respectful to each other. Anyone not being nice or being disrespectful will be warned, and then we can also uh, kick them or ban them from the space. If you want, there's also a block feature in GatherTown that allows you to not receive messages or not hear or see any specific person. Um, yeah, and I will ask that you do not come on the stage or get into the podiums when the speakers are obviously presenting. Um, our agenda, we have 3 lightning talks tonight from Adam, Alissa, and Jasmin. And afterwards, we will be having a raffle. So Detectify has offered 3 um, full conference passes to SecTor for free, and we will be drawing that right after the lightning talks. And then immediately after that, we will be having our Q&A, where you can ask your questions. So you can queue up to the right of the main stage if you want to ask questions. And then at the end, we will be opening up our beer hall. So if you have noticed, at the bottom left of the conference hall, there is a door to another space that is a beer hall. Currently, it is closed right now, but we will be opening that after the Q&A so that people have more space for private conversations. Any questions? Did I miss anything?
No.
All right. Okay. Well, without further ado, I'd like to invite our very own Adam Greenhill from the OWASP Toronto chapter to talk about the OWASP Top 10.
All right. Thank you, Yukfei. Let me just see if I can get this all sorted. You can hear me, right? All right. I see some nods. And I'm sharing my screen here. Can you guys see that? Oh, wait. Sorry. Give me 1 second.
I forgot to mention, you can click on the top row where Adam is sharing his screen to see his slides, or you can click on someone's video so that you can see their display on full screen. Sorry, Adam.
Oh, no worries. Glad that you pointed that out. Okay, so you can see my screen and you can hear me. So good to go? Awesome. Thank you, Yukfei. Let me get back to my first slide here. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. So if you haven't heard, there is a brand new OWASP Top 10 that was just released a couple of weeks ago. And that's what I'll be presenting here. Because it's a lightning talk, didn't want to dive in with an introduction. But like Yukfei said, I'm a co-lead of OWASP Toronto. And so what is the OWASP Top 10? Well, the OWASP Top 10, if you're brand new to this, is a list that represents a broad consensus on the most critical security risks to web applications. And we'll kind of touch upon this a couple times throughout this presentation, but the OWASP Top 10 is just a security baseline. It's not all-encompassing. You can still be at risk if you cover the top 10. So it's really just a high-level baseline for compliance, education, and vendor tools. For more information, you can browse to owasp.org/top10 or owasptop10.com. So with that in mind, people always reach out to me and ask me like the timeline for the OWASP Top 10. It started out as like kind of a yearly thing and then moved to 2 years, then 3 years. Now it's kind of more of a 4-year thing. So we probably won't see another OWASP Top 10 for at least another 3 or 4 years. So with that in mind, how is the top 10 generated? From what I understand, there's going to be a formal presentation on this from the leadership team at OWASP, where they really dive in to discuss how the top 10 is generated, the data gathered, and all that. But for now, they just released kind of a high-level summary, which goes like this. The OWASP Top 10 starts out with initial planning call, where the team gets together, they discuss a rough schedule for the OWASP Top 10 when it wants to be released, as well as kind of what they're aiming for, like what kind of data they should be gathering and whatnot. From then, a industry survey is released. This is where industry participation is requested. People can answer that survey, provide their anonymized company data, and basically help to the OWASP team to come up with this OWASP Top 10. Stage 3 is the analysis part, where they take in that data, normalize it, analyze it, and then they basically come up with a draft OWASP Top 10, which has 8 risks from that analyzed and normalized data, and then 2 risks from the community survey, which just the general public can participate in and to vote on. And that draft is publicly released on GitHub, where users can provide their suggestions, feedback, issues with it. It's a very open process. And then finally, stage 5 is when they release it. That's where we are today. So that top 10 is the official top 10 for 2021. So if you're familiar with the OWASP Top 10 2017 edition, here is a high-level view of what has changed. I will be going into each of these categories in more detail, so I won't spend too much time on it. But as you can see, the orange arrows here indicate that a section has been dropped. Like on the ranking, as you can see, like A1 injection has been dropped to the third one. Green arrow means that it has gone up in the ranking, so it's become more of a risk this year than it was when we last analyzed the data. And the yellow highlight indicates that an issue has been like changed or morphed into another problem, or sorry, another category. And then finally, we have a couple of new categories here that were not present in any of the previous sections, which would be A4, A8, and A10. But that is kind of like a high-level summary of the OWASP Top 10. Now let's get into each of the individual categories. So the top security risk that was identified by the OWASP team is broken access control. And this is the same issue that was presented back in 2017. And it's really just a highlight of authorization issues. This is where you have situations where privilege escalation is performed. Maybe you are a low-level privileged user that can access admin functionality, or you can access and modify, manipulate data that you shouldn't be able to. Like maybe you can access records of other users, like health records or personal data, that kind of thing. But it's really just about authorization issues. And the OWASP team found that this is the issues that create the biggest breaches, resulting in the largest costs. And those costs could be potentially in actually fixing the issue, but also compliance blowback or reputation loss from the problem. A2 is related to cryptographic failures. And this is renamed from the AO3 from 2017, which was called sensitive data exposure. And their rationale was this provides a better understanding of where the issue lies, because these are related to cryptographic problems. And so examples of that are really in a couple different domains. One is problems with cryptography with regards to data at rest. So, encrypted databases, or, you have cloud assets which are not properly encrypted, and then also data in transit. So making sure that your end-to-end communication is secured. So that's typically TLS. And sensitive data, like in this day and age with the processing power that we have, really everything should be encrypted everywhere. But the OWASP Top 10 O2 really wanted to highlight this problem with regard to sensitive data like PHI, PII, or if you don't know those acronyms, personal health information, or personally identified information, or credit card information. And AO3, this is the most highlighted risk from 2017, and it is now dropped to the third biggest risk in the new top 10. And injection really just describes the abuse of any unsanitized or unvalidated input, like SQL injection, OS injection. It has injection this year has also taken in the other categories from 2017, like cross-site scripting, and things like that. So basically any issue that kind of results in unsanitized input. I will say that it doesn't include everything, because even though server-side request forgery, which we'll talk about later in this presentation, it really is an injection issue, but the OWASP team wanted to highlight that separately, so it was included in another category. But in any case, that is injection. The fourth risk in the OWASP Top 10 2021 is insecure design. And this is a brand new category really focusing on design and architectural flaws. The mindset here is really helping development teams shift left and implement practices such as threat modeling, secure design patterns, and reference architectures, which is really just taking known good ways of architecting development practices and implementing those within your own organizational practices. Halfway through the list, AO5 is security misconfiguration, and this is the same issue that was presented previously, just at a higher slot than it was prior, and it relates to issues related to basically misconfigurations. So missing security hardening, like applying default configurations or default settings, or enabling features that are unnecessary. Like maybe in your like lower stage environment, you have like web application debugging enabled, but in production that shouldn't be enabled. So, just forgetting to kind of configure things more securely for production, as opposed to, in your earliest stages of development. And these issues really stem from a lack of consistent and repeatable process or hardening processes. But also having a non-minimalistic technological stack where you just, have things that aren't really necessary, which could potentially be exploited. AO6, which is an issue that was also presented in the 2017 edition, but it has risen from the 9th slot, and that is vulnerable and outdated components. And really, this all discusses the idea that web applications have components which are super outdated, that could potentially be configured securely, but because of their age, have unfixable problems or problems that shouldn't be there because of their age. And the real kind of core issue here is that companies may not have robust asset management programs to identify what software they have in their environments, but also an insufficient patch management program to be able to fix those problems. Because ideally, companies purchase software from like 10 years ago, which they might not be able to decommission because there's no real plan to decommission, or can't update it. So those are the kind of issues related to AO6. And next is AO7, another new category. Or sorry, it's not new, it's just been renamed since the previous year. And this is basically related to authentication issues as opposed to authorization issues. And the authorization issues back in 2017 edition of OWASP Top 10 was the second highest risk that was reported. So it has dropped a fair amount here to be AO7 this year. But for those that don't know, the authentication issues that are described in this category include brute force attacks, default and weak passwords, issues with account recovery, like say when you reset your password, you like in that form that you are resetting, you have like a identifier related to your account, like an email address, and you could potentially manipulate that to reset somebody else's account. The issues are kind of limitless, but that's just an example of what we mean by account recovery problems. But also within this category is session token mismanagement. So sessions will last indefinitely, or can be manipulated to like access additional functionality, et cetera, et cetera. And the resolution of these problems are really issue specific, like implementing multi-factor authentication, brute force protection, adequate password strengths, session management, all of those things. AO8 is in fact a brand new category for this year, and it's related to software and data integrity failures. And this describes a situation where applications or systems are overly trustworthy of other systems, components, and plugins. Like as an example, routers that are configured to allow unsigned updates. So You have like a malware that can potentially patch a router on the fly to install, malware into the router, et cetera, et cetera. But also, it's important to note that this also includes the idea of CI/CD pipelines without build checks. Because in that whole shift left mentality that I mentioned previously, and the idea of developing systems that kind of work for you to build software and deploy software, making sure that deployment cycle is managed securely. This is a really interesting topic because I think it also kind of touches upon the whole like supply chain issues that we've been seeing as well. So it's a really interesting category, and everybody should check that out. And really, the fix for this category is making sure that integrity checking is embedded within the build process. AO9 is security logging and monitoring, and this risk is all about applications and making sure that they are doing proper logging and monitoring of their functionalities. This could mean having auditable events for like logins, logins, failed and successful, but also high value transactions as well. So making sure that if your web application maybe accesses like sensitive data, for example, or performs large financial transactions, that these are all logged so that suspicious activity could potentially be detected from being performed. So this is the category that really kind of nails that down. Not only making sure that things are auditable, but also ensuring that there's proper procedures in the case that things are detected, and of course making sure that data, that logging data, is protected as well, because if it's not protected, then it kind of becomes null and void, this entire process. So that's that category. And the last one is server-side request forgery, or SSRF. And this is a specific injection flaw where a web application fetches a remote resource that doesn't validate the user-supplied URL. As an example, some web applications have a profile picture functionality where you can enter a URL to remotely grab an image. If that is not validated properly, you could potentially have a situation where you put an internal URL as an example, and that web application will try to talk to internal systems because it doesn't know any better. And it's preventable in a application layer where you either have allow lists or deny lists to prevent mismanagement of that grabbing functionality, but it could also be prevented from a network layer where you have strict firewall policies or network controls to prevent that kind of thing from happening. And so that is the OWASP Top 10, but it's really only the beginning. It's only a starting point. If you're looking for a more mature software development model, consider looking into like the OpenSAM, and link is there. But also consider the other OWASP projects as well that can help assist development programs. Like you have the OWASP Proactive Controls, which describes the most important controls that every architect and developer should implement. You have the Application Security Verification Standard, or ASVS, which provides a basis for testing web applications and provides developers with a control or list of controls to implement during development. You also have the cheat sheets, which provide very quick and easy fixes for common problems in securing web applications. And of course, you have the web and mobile testing guides, which provide like walkthroughs on actually penetration testing these applications. And that's it for me. I guess questions are at the end of the day, or end of the session. So I'll pass the floor back to Yakve.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Like Adam said, just a reminder, we are saving questions for the Q&A at the end. Two more things. First is that the talks are being recorded right now. Only the talks portion of the session, not the private chats that you'll be having, so that they can be viewed later after the event. Second thing is we have a feedback form for this event. You can find the link if you go to the message board that is on the right-hand side of the conference hall. you go close to it and you press X, and you will find the link to our feedback form. All right, next up we have Alissa Knight, who will be sharing her insights on hacking APIs. So I'll invite Alissa up on the stage. Thank you.
What's up, everyone? Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're in. Thank you, Adam, for that presentation. I love the emphasis on broken authentication. I'm definitely going to be covering that tonight, as well as Yukfei on everything else with the with actually just inviting me here to speak. Thank you so much, everybody, and Detectify for having me. Jocelyn, absolutely love and adore you. Thank you very much. All right, let's do this. Hopefully everyone has had their coffee. All right. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So what I'm going to be presenting today is my new research titled The Price of Hubris, Overestimating the Security of Your APIs. And so what I'm going to be covering are really the kill chain that I use in attacking APIs, which was covered in this paper. And all of the research that I do is usually sponsored by a client. Full disclosure, actually, Detectify is a client of mine, and I just recently released a paper called Go Fuzz Yourself, which has resulted in people kind of referring to me at this point as the Fuzz Queen. But definitely also want to cover attack surface management in this as well, in addition to the things. So first and foremost, who the heck am I, and why should you be listening to me about hacking APIs? I am a recovering hacker of 21 years. I'm a published author. I published the first book on hacking connected cars, and now I'm in the process of writing my second book called Hacking APIs, and that'll be coming out in the early part of next year. I am a filmmaker and content creator in cybersecurity, so I run one of several companies. One of them is KnightInk, and that company is a content creation firm. And what we do is we create content for cybersecurity vendors, whether it's videos or writing papers. That vulnerability research, or what I call adversarial content, is typically sponsored by one of my clients. So I am a partner at KnightInk, Knight Capital, Knight Entertainment, Knight Publishing. We have a family of companies my wife and I own, depending on what we're doing. I am also writing a screenplay for a new TV series based on my life, which will be airing on Netflix. Either Netflix or Amazon Prime. We're currently shopping, but whoever is the highest bidder on that. And I'm also the Chief Information Security Officer for Quonic Bank as well. So some of my research that I've done over the last few years, and why I'm this authority in API security, is I published research on hacking 30 mHealth apps and APIs in 2020, hacking fire APIs this year, hacking federal and state law enforcement vehicles through APIs this year. Some great videos on this on my YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, definitely subscribe to my channel. And hacking 55 banks through their APIs, and that was just presented as a keynote at Money 2020. So for those of you who are like, Alissa, this sounds amazing, but what the hell is an API? Think of an API as basically a waiter at a restaurant. So you come into the restaurant and you order your food. You're basically the API client or API consumer, and the waiter is the API going back into the kitchen, and the chefs are the application, really kind of serving up the data that you're requesting, and or food in this analogy, and the waiter bringing that food out to you to consume it. That is a great example of an API. Another great example is an electrical socket in your home. It really doesn't matter what you connect to the electrical socket, whether it's your hair dryer or your iPhone to charge it. At the end, which is the application in this case, the electrical company doesn't care what's actually consuming that electricity. Its just job is which is the API, in this case is the electrical socket. Its job is to provide that electricity or whatever that application is serving. So that's pretty much all an API does, is it allows applications to talk to each other. So I'm going to talk about my API kill chain. So for those of you who are here to learn about really interesting tools like Alissa, I've always wanted to know what is your tech lab? What are the tools that you use to hack APIs? And one of the things I can tell you is definitely Mobile Security Framework. This is a free open source tool that you can download from GitHub. And what it does is it allows you to do what's called static code analysis of a mobile app. And so it supports both Android and iOS apps. And you can basically drag and drop those apps into this web-based user interface and do what's called static code analysis. And what I use this for is to find hard-coded API keys and tokens in the app. After I'm done with that, I do what's called traffic analysis, where I do traffic interdiction, where I'll actually run the app, or it's in the case of a web-based client, I'll load up Chromium within Burp Suite and actually perform traffic interdiction and look at that traffic and figure out what is the app doing, how does the API work. So if it's a mobile app, I'll touch every button and do everything that the mobile app supports. And then if it's a web-based app, I'll basically run that and try every option that the API supports. So what does this do? It allows me to really understand or footprint that API and understand how it works. So that's really the point of the reconnaissance stage for me, is understanding how that API works. Then I'll go to step 2, exploitation. And the tools in this is I'll use Burp Suite. There's a free community edition you can download. Yes, there is a version that you can pay for, but you're really not gaining that much. I paid for it just to support Portswigger, but you can download the free community edition. And within that, instead of using, for example, a combination of Minim proxy and Postman, you can get all of those in a single application called Burp Suite, and it has different modules. So, for example, there's a proxy tab that will basically, if you click a button, will load Chromium, and it'll send all your packets from your web browser into Burp Suite in order to be replayed with Responder or Repeater, sorry. So, Burp Suite is a tool that I use in this stage. I also use Minim proxy and Postman. So if I want to actually create API requests from scratch, I'll use Postman. And then I'll use Minim proxy, which is really just an SSL WIDM tool. I like to call WIDM, woman in the middle attack tool. And I'll run that on my host. And then I'll point the proxy on my cell phone to my host running Minim proxy, and that will decrypt the traffic automatically and allow me to then copy and paste those packets into Postman and then test the API from there. But again, I like to work smart, not hard. So I'll eliminate Minim proxy and eliminate Postman and just use Burp Suite. So at this point, I'll test the hard-coded keys and tokens that I found in step 1, and I'll actually mutate the fields. So for example, if the API request is for /patient/1001, I'll manipulate that and change it to /patient/1002 and try and request other patient records. If in the case of a bank, which is how I hacked those 55 banks, or mHealth or Fire APIs, is I'll manipulate those fields. And instead of my account number, I'll change it to a different account number, or what's called the object ID, and change those. Properly securing APIs. So, how do you prevent against this attack? A lot of the APIs that I have exploited over the last decade have been protected by web application firewalls. The worst thing that you can do is for us to err on the side of what we understand or know best, which are web application firewalls. We think, okay, APIs speak the HTTP protocol, then we should use WAFs to secure them. That's an incredibly bad idea. WAFs are designed to look for what I call legacy-based attacks against legacy-based applications and monolithic applications like SQL injection. They're not going to look for things like, if I'm logged in as me, why am I requesting Jocelyn's patient records or requesting Jocelyn's account number? The WAFs are designed to look for, they're rules-based systems designed to look for certain content in the payload. It's not going to look for things like logic-based attacks or have an intimate understanding or context behind what the application is actually doing. Hack your own APIs. That's the best advice I can give. Hack your APIs before black hats do. Inventory your APIs. You can't protect what you don't know you have. This is a great opportunity to talk about attack surface management and why this is so important. So many of the APIs that I've hacked in the past are things that the organization didn't know about that were out there, such as your shadow API problem. And attack surface management is great with this in knowing that, okay, again, you can't protect what you don't know you have. With a lot of the APIs, what kind of data is the API serving? This is another thing that's very important. Systems that are caching credentials or caching connections. This is all attack surface management and all very important. Context and security, again, use a solution capable of shimming into or understanding the application and knowing how it works. This is very important. This is another reason why I think rules-based security controls need to be replaced by things that have context. This is why snort signatures are pretty much dead at this point, for those of you who remember snort. Know what your APIs are serving. Is it regulated data? This is important to know. If the typical organization that I used to work with ran about 1,500 APIs. Now I'm working with a company, for example, that's got over 6,000 APIs. How the hell are you going to know across 6,000 APIs what data each API is serving? How are you going to know which APIs to care about or think about? Remember, your organizations are not going to secure and protect against every vulnerability. They're going to take a business accepted risk approach to that. So what vulnerabilities or what issues are above the business accepted risk? So how can you do that if you don't know what data your APIs are serving? Again, attack surface management. What are your actual API serving? And then maybe you should focus more on those APIs that are serving PII or PCI or PHI. Authenticate and authorize. The number one vulnerability that I run into is broken object level authorization. Adam talked about the API top 10. You need to be aware of the OWASP API security top 10. And so that's the top 10 vulnerabilities affecting APIs. The number one vulnerability that I run into with APIs is BOLA. And that's basically the API has authenticated me. I have a JOT token, but I'm not authorized to be able to request the data that I'm authorizing. So this is a failure in authorization. So auth-n versus auth-c. And so a lot of developers are remembering to authenticate those requests, but they're failing to authorize. This is what allowed me to take remote control of the federal and state law enforcement vehicles, remotely start and stop the engine, or lock and unlock the doors, which is very bad for a police car, of course. Or access the 4 million patient records, or access the bank accounts that didn't belong to me and transfer money between accounts and change PIN codes. These are all authorization issues, and they are systemic across APIs from the different verticals that I've tested. And with that, that is it for my lightning talk. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so yet. Shame on you. Go to youtube.com, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell icon to be notified of new uploads. I upload every week, and subscribe to and follow me on my Twitter account, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And with that, I will step off the stage.
All right, thank you, Alissa. That was amazing. If you guys have questions, remember we are doing Q&A at the end, so save your questions for Alissa. Next up, we have Jasmin, who is coming on the stage right now. He will be giving a talk on what Alissa mentioned earlier, which is external attack surface management. With that, I will give you the stage, Jasmin.
Hello, can you guys all hear me? I assume
Yep.
so. Cool, thanks. So I'm just sharing my screen here. All right, it was a great talk, Alissa. I'll DM you. I'll have some questions for you. So welcome everybody to my talk. EASM Mystics waiting to happen. I know it's dinner time for most of us here, so I'll try to go as fast as possible so we can all chat and have a virtual drink, or just go eat after. So who am I? My resume is not as impressive as Alissa's. So my name is Jasmin Landry. We pronounce my name Jasmin. It's a French name. I am from Montreal. So I'm known as JRock17 in the security or bug bounty community. So you can find my profile on Detectify, Twitter, GitHub, Slack, Discord, HackerOne, Bugcrowd. Everything that's bug bounty related or secure in general, I'm known as JRock17. I'm currently the lead of IT and security at Metrio. It's a small startup here in Montreal. And of course, being from Montreal, I am a Canadiens fan.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, this year we're having a rough year. We suck. Hopefully we'll have a good a better November than we had start. So yeah. So today we're going to talk quickly about EASM and what it is, and then look at common mistakes that organizers tend to do, and then look at it from a hacker's perspective, and try and take advantage of those mistakes while hacking on or while doing bug bounty. So what exactly is EASM? So EASM, sorry, stands for External Attack Surface Management. So this is a way for organizations to continuously monitor their attack surface to get more visibility on security risk. And as Alissa mentioned, this covers a ton of data. So this covers IP addresses, subdomains, cloud-hosted infrastructure such as AWS, GCP, and Azure, SaaS applications such as Jira and ServiceNow. Also includes code repositories such as GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and even like acquisitions. I've seen that sometimes when companies acquire another company, they configure like a site-side VPN. So then those assets from the acquisitions are now part of yours. So you need to make sure that you monitor those as well. And as we just saw, mobile apps and APIs are also included in your EASM. And this is just a part of what it covers. Well, I mean, it says it in its name. It's everything that's externally facing that is accessible, available on the internet. So common mistakes that I've seen in my pen testing and bug bounty career, if you want to say it that way. Well, first off is the lack of change management. A lot of times we see expose applications or expose servers that were not supposed to be there. So like before cloud came a thing, everything was installed like on premise, and companies like before actually deploying the server had to go through proper management, proper approval. And now with cloud, like when you have an account in like for example AWS, if it's not properly configured, you probably can deploy something, which even if it's like on EC2 instance or a web application or something like that, sometimes we skip the change management part of it, which results in exposed information, exposed servers, exposed assets. They're not supposed to be on the internet. Second part is not respecting least privilege. Similar to what I just said. When we create accounts, for example, again, if I'm going to use the AWS as my example, we configure roles and permissions that aren't respecting the least privilege principle, meaning that they get more access than they should to developers. Instead of having like minimal access, they end up getting access to deploy EC2 servers, to deploy Elastic Beanstalk applications, deploy Lambda functions, deploy API gateways, all that stuff. So this, usually by default, it is exposed on internet, which makes it publicly accessible. And if it's not properly configured, then you could be looking at a potential breach or bounty. Another thing that I've seen in the past is misconfigured WAFs. More specifically to what you allow, I've seen a lot of assets that are protected by WAFs in a way that they only allow specific IPs. One good example of this was a few years ago. There was one asset where it only allowed IPs from AWS, but instead of putting their own IP from their own service, they put all of Amazon's IPs. And luckily for me, I run my recon tool from AWS, so I found that asset as I would normally, and I got access to a ton of information that wasn't supposed to be publicly available. I found more bugs on that application as well, and all of this because they were a bit too loose on what they were allowing. Like I said, they should have just allowed specific IPs, their own IPs, instead of allowing everything. And one as well that we see a lot is misconfigured S3 buckets. In the past, AWS had it public by default. That's not the case anymore, but we still see a lot of S3 buckets that are publicly available while they shouldn't. We've seen many breaches in the past few years caused by misconfigured S3 buckets. So these buckets can contain logs, config files, a lot of information that should be available publicly. So this, again, it's a big problem. Or I mean, it is still not as much as it was before, but it's still something that we see a lot of times. So now from a hacker perspective, so this applies to pen testing, hacking and bug bounty, hacking in general. It's really important to do a recon on everything. Like I said, EASM covers a ton of stuff. So we need to make sure that we continuously monitor subdomain, IP addresses, TLS certificates, third-party applications, continuously look at GitHub to make sure that developers don't like push sensitive information in their repositories, like hard-coded tokens, hard-coded credentials, stuff like that. It's really good to do a recon on as much as you can. And like I just said, continuous monitoring is really important as well. Since bug bounty is somewhat of a race against other people, it's important to monitor for new assets so that when a new asset is deployed on internet, you can get alerted right away and try to poke at it and see if you can find something that's not supposed to be there. Also monitor for any change. What I mean by that is, for example, if a JavaScript file has changed, look it up. Maybe they added a new endpoint. Look at the file size on certain assets, certain web applications. Look for a new functionality in mobile apps. Same thing for APIs. If there is documentation, look it up. Maybe they've added new functionalities there as well. Just like monitor as much as you can, like really wide, so that you can be the first on it and try to grab that bounty while looking for bug bounty. And that's it. Thanks you guys for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Jasmin. This concludes our 3 lightning talks. What we're gonna do next is a quick raffle of the 3 free SecTor conference passes that I mentioned, and after that we will be doing Q&A. So please stay tuned. Now, Alina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi. Let me share my screen and hopefully find the correct tab. And there, sorry, the wrong tab. It's quite late in the evening here in Sweden, so my computer is not totally agreeing with me. But yes, let's try that again. And there you go. Okay, so we have the attendees here, and let's spin the wheel and see. All right, Mr. Muffler gets the first ticket. Ooh, Chris, congratulations. And Rani. So we have our 3 winners. Do write your email addresses to me in the chat app, so I am sure to sent through the information. And yes, these are the tickets that are redeemable for either in person or a virtual event. And if you cannot attend it during the event itself, the recordings will be available as well. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Alina. So we will be doing Q&A right now. What I propose that we do is first start with maybe questions that you want to share with the rest of the attendees and all the speakers. And if you have such questions, please come up to the podium that's on the right-hand side of the stage, and then we can invite the speakers up and answer those. And then afterwards, we can have maybe a second stage of Q&A where we break it up and invite the speakers to go into different corners of the room. And then if you have specific questions that you want to ask them in a smaller setting, we can do that as well. How does that sound? I think I hear no objection. So let's do this. Who wants to start with questions? Don't be shy.
I would like to say, go Seahawks.
I have a question for Alissa. Let me start this off. So when you're testing the APIs, I think you mentioned that one of the common flaws is that people don't restrict access based on their privileges. And you can request for data based on an object UID, for example. I think one common pushback that I've seen is that they say the object ID is very random already. It's using a UUID that's very long and it's random, so it's very hard to guess. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's a huge problem with organizations or developers that are using that aren't doing that, right? They'll do like /001 or patient /1000. That's a real problem. But when they do auto generate that long string of text or whatever, it then becomes increasingly more difficult to figure out how to brute force or access other object IDs. So I think that's a good approach, but it's really not just a single silver bullet to security, right? So the important thing is to make sure that authorization there is there, where you're doing things like scopes, saying, okay, Alissa Knight is only allowed to access her patient record or her bank account number, right? It's yeah, you can do what they call security through obscurity, and you can do something like that, but you want to also not just expose those object IDs or deal with the exposing those object IDs, but also limiting the scope, using scopes to limit what I can and can't have access to.
All
Thank
right,
you for that.
thank you. I think Nitish has a question.
Hi, yes. Another question to Alissa now. You advise against using the WAF for API protection. Is there a different appliance that we can use? Is it an API gateway or is there something else?
Alissa, I don't think we can hear you. You might need to come back to the stage.
I'll come up. Okay. Okay, I think that answers my question. Sorry. Great question. I choose not to answer it. No, I'm just kidding. No, great question. So web application firewalls, yeah, bad. So I've never believed that security should be a feature of a product. So the fact that these API gateways are saying, oh, we do security also, it to me is just the API management companies trying to dig into that security budget, trying to access that security budget. I don't believe that security should be a feature of a product. I think security should be really built from the ground up. So my recommendation to you is use an API threat management solution, like the Traceables of the world and the other what are called API threat management solutions. So there's different companies out there depending on what you're doing. You could do, and I actually presented to Gartner on the state of the API security market, ironically enough. And the thing is that every API threat management solution out there approaches security in a different way. So like, for example, what's unique about Traceable is they actually shim into the application. Now that's going to require you to be able to have a supported language by Traceable. So Traceable has to support that language if they're going to shim into it. There is an option where you don't shim into the application, and it's more out on the outskirts of the app, of the API. There's a deployment mode for Traceable for that if it doesn't support the language. There's also other solutions like no-name security. That's another API threat management solution. Now that does not shim into the application. It actually will operate passively and then communicate to downstream API gateways to take action on bad traffic. So there's also 42 Crunch. That's a shift left, shield right security solution where it'll actually insert itself into the ID of the developers. Sorry, did I say Salt Security or 42 Crunch? So 42 Crunch. So it's shift left, shield right. 42 Crunch will insert itself into the IDE for the developer and yell at the developer when they're writing insecure code. It also is middle ground where you can actually import in the Swagger file or open API file for the API, and it will check the backend API against that contract. So if the contract is saying it only allows this, but the API actually supports these other things, it will yell at you and tell you, hey, there's a mismatch between the contract and what the API backend supports. And then it's also will proxy the API traffic. So all of your API traffic will go through it, and it can actually prevent attacks going to your APIs. So what I would recommend you do is create a functional requirements document. Figure out what is it that you need from the API threat management solution, and then go out there and evaluate the different API threat management solutions out there. Deploy Traceable as a POC. Deploy No-Name as a POC. Deploy 42 Crunch as a POC. And figure out, what it is that you like about those things and what you don't like about those things. And definitely for our sponsors and for my client, for Detectify, definitely focus on attack surface management, because again, you can't protect against what you don't know you have. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions? Come on, don't be so shy, everyone. You have this one-on-one time with Alissa Knight and Adam Greenhill and these other amazing presenters. Any other questions? No such thing as a dumb question. Nothing? How about some tool questions? Any questions on some of the tools I use or tools you can use?
All right, I'm going to ask another question then about tools specifically. You mentioned Burp Suite. Us being from OWASP, obviously, I'm going to have to ask this. Do you use Zap at all?
Yeah, of course I do. I love Zap. So, I definitely will lean towards free open source tools if I can. There's a lot of great API security tools out there. Oh, definitely check out a fuzzing tool called KiteRunner. That's a great free open source fuzzer. Listen, if all of you ignore everything I said today and just take home one thing, take home this. The most important thing that you can do is fuzz your APIs. You need to be fuzzing your APIs. Content discovery tools like KiteRunner are great if you're looking for that free open source tool to do fuzzing. Another one is from Microsoft called Wrestler. That's a great tool. Yeah, so definitely Zap is a great tool. I'm waiting for OWASP to come out with an amazing fuzzer. So pass that on if you guys know anybody at OWASP. It would be great to see OWASP do that. But yeah, definitely I would say Zap is a big tool that I use. I don't use it quite as frequently as like Burp Suite, but it is a great tool.
I think it comes down to personal preference. I also use
Yeah.
Burp more than Zap.
Yeah, it's not a bad tool. It's just, I had problems very early on where Zap was crashing a lot. I don't know if you experienced that. No, not
It's
just to throw
a lot better
OWASP
now.
under the, but yeah, that was earlier versions. It's probably gotten a lot better. Nitish.
Sorry, I'm back. But this one is for everybody on the forum essentially. So I'm sort of new to security, and the question I have is, if I want to go beyond the tools and actually understand what the tool does in terms of how it counters, how it actually does a penetration test, or to understand what kind of tests are being done, so I could probably programmatically write them. What is the best way to go and learn that, to get beyond the tools, to actually learn the concepts behind them?
Oh, that's a good question. I am not a developer, so I can't speak to this. There's probably some amazing developers in the audience, but yeah, I mean, for me, at least on the exploit side, for doing exploitation, there's nothing better than downloading the source code and actually looking at it and running it and seeing what it does. I'm a packet monkey. So, Nitish, I can speak to the layer 3 of this, where, if I wanted to learn how a tool works, not necessarily write the code, but just learn how the tool works and what it's doing, what the stimulus and response is, I'll actually run the tool after looking at the source code and attempting to write something similar or even modify it to do something else. But yeah, but also recording the packets with something like TCP dump and looking at the packets, because a lot of the story can be told by packets. So, but yeah, I don't know if there's any other developers in the audience who want to try and answer that. I am not a programmer.
I could answer that one if you want.
Cool, go for it.
Yeah, so I'd actually go out on OWASP and look at, there's a integration framework, and it gives you the whole thing of different OWASP pieces, parts throughout the SDLC, right? Because it, to me at least, working on pen testing, working on providing requirements, putting things up front, and then working with remediation, I get involved with dev teams at many different life cycles and different stages of their development. It doesn't always follow the same path, right? And so I would look there because, your opportunity, especially if you're in a centralized AppSec group, doesn't come at the beginning and doesn't flow the same way. And sometimes you'll be working with teams that get an outside pen test report and, nobody there to help guide them. So I would really look at that integration framework. I wouldn't really rely on the top 10. I'd look at different classes of CVEs, figure out what your top 10 is, and then start to build patterns in that. That is one question I had, kind of to pitch another question, but what's the group's thoughts about enterprise SaaS tools? Are they dead? Because dev teams now can pick any open source thing, but it doesn't fit the enterprise always. And it's really hard to give a team that's maybe doing DevOps and has great integration with PMD or Brakeman or something else, right? As an enterprise team, you're like, yeah, that's great, but how can I make that an enterprise tool? What's the group's thoughts there? Because I don't see the spend on enterprise tools, training, or protection really moving into development teams. They just simply can't get the budget for it in a big company that isn't a software development company. Thoughts?
Yeah, nothing for me. I can't really speak to this.
I think Ophi's coming up to jump in, I think.
Yeah, I get this question a lot. So, I'll let you know what my personal opinion is. So there are, I wouldn't say that enterprise security tooling is dead in terms of like SaaS tooling. And the reason why is because the equivalent for open source tooling or for QA tooling isn't there yet. So it's not that they're great solutions to the problem, but there is a gap definitely in moving to like a more DevOps friendly kind of style of tool. So in the meantime, like a hybrid of those kinds of things is probably required. There are some more cost-effective like options in terms of like SaaS and DaaS tooling that you can use as sort of a stopgap measure in the DevOps pipeline, so that you can run at the speed of DevOps, but also maybe do some of the monolithic scans every so often just to see if you have additional coverage. So that's generally what I would suggest is like you might be able to set up Zap, or you might be able to set up, I think, the SonarQube with a couple of their open source signature, like their open source scanners, or some of the other ones that are like relatively short. You can even, I've seen some people who have the time and the expertise. They transfer some of the signatures from other tooling into like a Selenium script and then use that. So there's like different options for making that work at a super small scale, and then just running your monolithic testing a little bit more strategically, as opposed to like every single build, or even running your monolithic tools once weekly instead, and putting those things in monitor mode. So a lot of the getting your enterprise tooling to work is a lot around learning how to use it in ways that doesn't interfere with things, but also covering your bases a little bit. If cost specifically is an issue, there are some cheap, or some relatively cheap options, especially if you're doing it once or twice a year as opposed to all the time. So I mean, if you want to chat about that, I can go on this topic forever, because I have this same conversation with clients all the time. It's really, it highly depends on like your company's level of expertise with the products and tooling as well, because you do need to have somebody who's able to manage the findings, right? So the fun part, I guess, about the open source tooling is that a lot of it is relatively immature in terms of removing false positives and helping you find solutions to problems. So you have to supplement with knowledgeable people in a lot of those cases in order to get sort of the risk recipe correct. So when you make the case to management about managing your risk and also managing the findings and like the cost of tooling, that whole argument about how much expertise you need to supplement the tools with and how much time and effort it's going to take to customize this stuff also comes into the equation when you do the calculation with them. So those are like high level thoughts. I'm happy to like have anybody else speak about it.
And one thing I'd like to comment on, you mentioned SonarSource. One thing to note for other people on the call, SonarSource, the commercial version, right, or the community version, does not cover cross-site scripting or injection attacks. That's in the enterprise version. So don't go in there assuming it does. The other thing with SonarSource is it's a code quality solution. So if you're a centralized AppSec team and you go to rules.sonarsource.com and you're taking Java, for example, you will be taking on, if you own those findings that come out of the tool, 88% of them are code quality. It's hard enough to get the security findings, which are 12%, out of that tool, yet alone, throw all the code quality ones in there. So look at it, but those are ones I would encourage people to partner with the DevOps teams, but don't go off on a safari with that as your own tool. You'll probably overextend where you're welcome as an enterprise team.
And it is very limited in the number of things that it covers and the consistency of those results, because it relies heavily on open source tools, some of which are no longer really maintained. So I walk a lot of people back from using SonarQube as their only source.
Dittos.
At the same time, if you're getting pushback about code scanning at all, it can be tuned. It is not terrible. It's still better than nothing.
Exactly.
Right? So the organization that you're in and the relationship that you have with the development teams and all these other fun things will really have a lot to do with what's feasible, what's possible, what's rational in your organization. But do keep in mind that those open source tools are not as good yet as the enterprise scanning tools, even though the enterprise scanning tools are clunky and stupid, and a lot of times they're slow in ways that you don't particularly like.
I kind of think of it as as an on ramp to the highway, and there's many different on ramps. Don't think of it as an intersection where you're hitting that team head on, right? Work with them and merge to where they're going, because they'll have different reasons for using the tool, and often they're just trying to do something early to check a box and maybe not do the coverage that you might see from that. There's a lot of different tools that are really good too. So another good partner is if you have a GitHub or source code management practice in your org, using those tools, because then you've already got everybody's source code in one place. You're not chasing that down or herding cats.
There are some really good new products that are going into GitHub and that are, using GitHub Actions and are trying to integrate into the GitHub merge and approvals flow as well. So don't think of your SaaS or your DAS tool as your one thing to help you with this problem. Like the scanning tools that are very traditionally, scanning tools that you do, before a release and stuff like that. There's tons of now tools that are taking advantage of your in IDE context checking that will do, I guess you could call it spell checking for security issues. Then they're getting more and more sophisticated. There's also some that are including software composition analysis in the code review process. So lots of interesting developments going there. Some of the big SaaS tools are a bit starting to stagnate in a lot of ways, but I think it's because we're trying to make a transition from an industry perspective to ecosystems of tools that will help out with different things. And then also it's a little expensive to develop net new tooling. And we haven't made the jump between kind of the old style and the new style yet, right? Security and application security is still one of those things that is at the bottom of the list of people's security budget. So when that's the case, vendors are going to spend their time in other places, right, with more money involved. So you're seeing more from my perspective, we're seeing more point solutions. Anyway, I'll get off the podium, let other people talk. Thank you.
All right, I think what I'll suggest now is that we move off to more informal chats. The bar is now open. So if you go to the hall's bottom left, follow the arrow and you will enter the bar space. And there will be some private chat areas where you can just chat amongst groups and not be interrupted by others. All right. Anything else, Alina, before we head off?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. I do need to jump into another meeting, so I have a hard stop, but I appreciate everyone for attending tonight and for inviting me to be part of this. Please definitely reach out to me on social media or DM me if anyone has any questions or wants to talk further. But everyone have a good night, and thanks again for this opportunity, OWASP Toronto.
Thank you, Alissa. Much appreciated.
Okay.
All right, let's head
Yes.
off to the bar.
Let's head off to the bar. Amazing.